So Jessica Jones Season 2 debuted last week. It took me a full week to watch the entire thing, but I've done so now, and that means it's time to stop and rank all 8 Marvel Netflix seasons. Before I give you my ranking, tell me down below in the comment section, how do you rank these seasons, or at least the ones that you've seen? I'd love to get your take on it. A nice lively discussion, because we've had some great seasons, we've had some not so great seasons, and a good bit of divisive stuff there in the middle. Also, as I go through this, I'm going to avoid spoilers, because I know different people have watched different series, and Jessica Jones Season 2 just came out, so I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, so I'm going to avoid as much of that as is possible. With that said, let's get started. Coming in last place is Iron Fist. Now, I know almost nothing about Iron Fist outside of what I learned through the series. I've never read the comic books, so I was kind of excited to learn more about the character, as I love Marvel characters and I love the Marvel Netflix stuff. And then this season was such a disappointment and kind of a total mess. The first 4 episodes of this were just kind of bizarre to me, as it sort of did an Oliver Queen type scenario with the long lost rich guy coming back and trying to reclaim his throne, and there was all sorts of legal trouble he was going through trying to prove who he was, and it seemed like such an odd direction to spend so much time on. It gets a little bit better as it progresses and the plot starts to kick in, and we learn about the Hand and the different factions inside the Hand, and they're not all super evil. So I like the world building that went along with it. But beyond that, the story here just did not work. And a lot of that goes back to our lead character is written in such a way that he's so whiny, confused, and lacking in a sense of heroism or having charisma that it's hard to want to watch a show following this lead character. But he just did not work particularly well. And some of the fight choreography was really cool. I enjoyed seeing a drunken boxing fight in the middle of the season. And then some of it was just kind of throwaway punch, punch, kick, kick, you know, by the numbers type things. So all in all, there wasn't a whole lot here to engage me, but easily the worst of all 8 seasons. Coming in at number 7 is Jessica Jones Season 2. Now, after the first season, the bar for this one was set pretty high, and unfortunately, it did not live up to my expectations. Now, as before, the acting here is great. Krysten Ritter takes this incredibly complex character and brings her to the screen, and whether she needs to be the funny person that's sarcastic, or the broken person that's crying, or this conflicted person that does not know what to do with the people around her in the circumstances that she's in, she pulls all of it off. Carrie-Anne Moss is another standout as Hogarth, who this character that, as written in some ways, is so unlikable, but is still compelling largely because of the performance that's seen on screen. But the season had 2 really big problems. The first off, the characters are so unlikable that there's no one that we're rooting for, and the way the story's built, there's not really a clear villain that we're rooting against. The second problem with the season ties back to that story issue of, since there's no clear villain, since there's no clear conflict out here, as you're going throughout the season, there's not a strong sense of urgency. We're trying to overcome something. We're just exploring characters as they make really bad choices and are very conflicted in how to relate to one another. And by the end of it, you just can't have any sense of satisfaction throughout any of it. Also, it feels like the season spends way too much time looking backwards as opposed to moving forward. Now, that worked for the first season, but when you have a series that just is constantly looking backwards and why is Jessica like this? Why is Jessica like this? As opposed to watching Jessica move forward, it gets very frustrating, and it feels like you have a show that has no forward momentum. At number 6 is Luke Cage Season 1. Now, the first half of the season is great. I love the way it built this sense of atmosphere and community. You felt like you were with him living in an actual place, and you saw how it related to the people around him. Even the function and role he plays as a superhero ties back to the nature of the community that he's in. It also has kind of a vibe with the music they use, the soundtrack, the score, the way they go to nightclubs. All of it builds a great sense of a location and an atmosphere that we're in. Also, there's kind of the main villain with Cottonmouth and his cousin, and the way that kind of all that works with the politics of it. All complicated, fascinating, interesting. Loved all that. And then something happens about halfway through the season, and it goes in a wildly different direction, and I thought it lost all of its momentum and even its sense of tone. It gets a lot campier in the second half as a third villain is introduced. It's a lot more direct comic booky that feels out of place with what came before. And unfortunately, it creates a scenario where the season ends with a bit of a bad taste in your mouth. But at the same time, I'm still very optimistic for season 2 because the first half of the season was so strong. If the second half had been as good as the first half, this would be like a top 2 for me. At number 5 is The Defenders. To state the obvious, as a huge huge fan of the Marvel Netflix stuff. I was so excited for this season, and the end result was good, but very bland at the same time. On the positive side of things, I love seeing these characters come together, doing the Avengers type thing, all joined together in one season. I thought they had great rapport with each other when they had to sit down in the restaurant and stuff. Some great banter, some great little quips from Jessica Jones and things like that. Also, I thought there were some great sequences, whether you got Iron Fist fighting Luke Cage in that iconic shot of the fist punching Luke Cage, or that hallway fight scene. There's some great moments sprinkled throughout this entire thing. And it also very much is the kind of culmination of this hand plot line that was woven throughout many of these seasons. So I enjoyed all of that. At the same time, the end result feels very mediocre for how cool this really should be. First off, it started with a total whimper. The first episode I thought was a bore. It was just dull as can be. Then they got Sigourney Weaver to join the season, and she makes a very minor impact on the season in general. You think you get Ellen Ripley to be on your Marvel Netflix show, she's going to be super important, and that's not how it plays out at all. She's very bland and forgettable. Then from there, just the general impact of the fact that all these shows came together makes so little impact on you. You don't really hate it. It's not awful. It's just mediocre. It just kind of happens, and that is such a disappointment considering what this could have been. So the bottom four were all disappointing to me for the various reasons that I mentioned, but these top four are all very good to excellent in my mind. Coming in at number 4 is Jessica Jones Season 1. Now this is one of the most unique and interesting seasons on Marvel Netflix for the simple fact of the matter is Jessica Jones is a superpowered character, but she's a private eye that's an alcoholic that is an incredibly broken character. With this season, they found a way to work in her past with the Kilgrave character who did such horrible things to her and made her do such horrible things that he makes for one of the sleaziest and most disturbing villains in any way associated with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The way that he uses control for just such selfish and conniving and evil purposes just makes your skin crawl every single time that you see him or learn anything about him. This is also probably the most thematically rich of all of the Marvel Netflix seasons. All sorts of ideas are explored here, especially about control and what that does to other people. My biggest issue with the season is it meanders a little bit, and some of the plot lines I don't think pay off particularly well, especially about the one about the soldier guy that goes on the pills and stuff like that. But overall, a very interesting, unique season with a lot of great stuff about it. Coming in at number 3 is The Punisher Season 1. I'm a big fan of The Punisher, and I'm a big fan of Jon Bernthal, so this season actually happening was a kind of a dream come true for me. And it functions not just as an action series or a Punisher series, but also as a political thriller with a lot more emotional depth to it than you often find in versions of The Punisher. Now, to some people that might be a negative. To me, I'd say that's more of a positive and the benefit of doing an actual TV show. The action is handled in a way that you can see what's happening, and it's so visceral and in your face that sometimes you don't want to see what's happening because it's so gory and grisly and uncomfortable to watch. But that's what makes this show true to The Punisher and the vicious violence of it all. My biggest issue with the season was it felt a little bit like in Daredevil Season 2, they gave us the origin of the Punisher and they closed that out in the first 10 minutes of this season, and then it felt like it looped back and it wanted to retell and explore that story, much like I talked about with Jessica Jones Season 2, where it was unnecessary for them to go back as opposed to moving forward. I would have preferred that it went a little bit further forward with the story, more so than looping back and retelling a new version of the origin story that we already know. But overall, a very cool action-based story with political vibes to it that's a nice, unique addition to the Marvel Netflix universe. Our runner-up is Daredevil Season 1. I was so excited when they first announced this season was happening, and from that very first episode, I just fell in love with this series. There's a lot to love here. First off, it's such a serious take on the characters where there's depth of storytelling in the long 13-episode long story arc going on. The casting here is phenomenal. When you start getting Vincent D'Onofrio to play the Kingpin, it takes it up to that extra level, and he has such a nuanced, weird, quirky take on the character where you don't root for him, but you sympathize with him. And he plays so many different dynamics to it, whether he's the guy that's smitten with a girl, or the person that's the crime boss, or the guy that when he loses his temper, people literally lose their heads. He pulls all of it off. Also, the fight scenes here are just fantastic. I mean, the second episode has this fight scene that's one take long. It's like 4 minutes long. And it's not just one of the best fight scenes on television from that year. It's just one of the best fight scenes of that entire year. Movies, television combined, all of it. And one of the things I loved about this is that it established kind of this New York City pocket universe inside of the MCU. It comes after the events of the Avengers, and they're kind of alluded to throughout things, and that kind of ties into Kingpin's plan. And it makes for this nice, very community-based situation where we can have these different heroes of our Marvel Netflix series going on with all this happening. And this is the show that established all of that and did a great job of doing it. I love the Daredevil series. I can't wait for season 3. But to me, the best season was Daredevil season 2. After falling in love with Daredevil in season 1, this season took everything up to the next level for me. As mentioned before, I love Jon Bernthal as the Punisher, and they find a way to bring him into this universe that's so grounded but still equally as vicious and violent, whether he's fighting in a prison cell and just shanking dudes or inside of a coffee diner smashing them in the face with coffee. It's vicious. But what they also managed to do with the character, so he's having sit downs in the diner with someone giving relationship advice that you hear it and you go, I kind of believe that this broken guy would say such blunt things to someone in her situation. So I love the characterization of the Punisher in this season. For me, this was also probably one of the best paced of the Marvel Netflix seasons, simply because they found a way to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So in the beginning of the season, you have the Daredevil trying to track down the Punisher, who's trying to take out a bunch of gangs. In the middle act, you have Elektra show up, as well as the Hand kind of starts getting involved in things, and you have the Punisher on trial. And then you have the third act where all of this kind of comes together and you have a whole bunch of gigantic showdowns. So there's a flow throughout the whole season in different directions that it went, as opposed to just kind of meandering around a bunch of different plot lines. And I loved all of the different elements of the season. There were scenes in it where it was like, this is actually a really good courtroom drama right now. This season about a blind guy beating up thugs and ninjas has turned into a courtroom drama that I'm loving. To me, this is the peak of Marvel Netflix. But how about you? How do you rank the different seasons? Tell me down below in the comment section, which ones do you love, which ones do you hate? And these are fun because they're so different. So there's so many different opinions. Most people have Iron Fist at the bottom. I've seen a couple that have them up top. Most have it at the bottom, but like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Daredevil, people have them all over the place because they resonate with them differently because they're such different seasons. And I think that's one of the things that I love about Marvel Netflix is there's a vibe throughout them that stays the same. At the same time, they each have a unique flavor to each of them. So tell me down below how you rank them. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, like the one you're watching right now. But the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies and TV. I want to talk about them with you. So join me down in the comment section. I really do read them. I really do try to respond to as many as possible. And thank you for watching.